Hey folks, Ed here from Brain Pulp TV, and today I'm doing the long overdue deck tech for my pre-release kit deck that I used in both the Amonkhet PreRelease as well as games 1 and 3 of the most recent Mana Caves. Now, first and foremost, let me apologize for my voice. I am suffering from a cold, so it's not the strongest. It does add a bit of sort of like gravelly sexiness to it, so you can consider that a bonus, but yeah, I don't normally sound like this. Now, if you've watched Game 1 of the Mana Cave, you know that I played a green-black deck for my pre-release. But before I get into the cards that are in the deck itself, let's talk a bit about the rare cards that I opened up in my pre-release kit. I'm going to start with the most disappointing one. It is Dispossess. For 2 and 1 black, it gets you a sorcery. Choose an artifact card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the chosen name and exile them. Then that player shuffles his or her library. Now, this card may be great in a constructed format that uses Kaladesh, not so great in Amonkhet Limited. Now, another thing to note is that when I usually do pre-releases or sealed, I tend to move towards playing 3 colors, even if I don't have mana fixing, which is almost all of the time. So it was kind of bizarre that this time around I only played 2 colors, but my card pool had a ton of mana fixing in it. 3 of the cards were the new cycle lands: Fetid Pools, which was my pre-release promo card, Scattered Groves, and Sheltered Thicket. So this would allow me to tap for blue and black, or for green and white, or for red and green. However, I didn't play any of those color combinations. I played, once again, green-black. So those cards were kind of wasted, even though I am glad that I do have copies of them now. Next up, we have even more mana fixing in the form of Pyramid of the Pantheon. For 1, you get an artifact where you can pay 2, tap it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, put a brick counter on Pyramid of the Pantheon. You can also tap it, add 3 mana of any 1 color to your mana pool, activate this ability only if there are 3 more brick counters on Pyramid of the Pantheon. So once again, it could have been useful fixing, but because I was only playing 2 colors, I didn't end up using that card either. Now, the next 2 cards that I pulled, I did end up using in the deck, and they were actually the ones that sort of pushed me into going black-green. First, we have Chandler Initiate. For 1 and a green, it's a human druid creature. When Chandler Initiate enters the battlefield, put 3 -1/-1 counters on target creature you control. You can then tap it, remove a -1/-1 counter from a Chandler Initiate, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And normally it is a 3/4 creature, but when the counters go on it, it becomes a 0/1 mana dork. Now, the great thing about this is, 1, it's ramp. It's ramp that you can tap for any color. And over the course of the game, the more you tap it, when mana becomes less needed from a source like this, when you're going to have more lands on the board, it becomes a larger and larger creature. So it actually becomes a more useful fighting creature later on when you don't necessarily need it for tapping for mana. Also, if you really don't want to, you don't have to put the counters on this creature. So it's good as just a creature to get on the board, and you can just sort of flood a smaller creature maybe with the -1/-1 counters if you prefer. And last but not least of the rares that I have is actually a mythic, and it is Liliana, Death's Majesty. For 3 and 2 black, you have a 5 loyalty planeswalker. The +1 is create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. -3 is return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. And her -7 is destroy all non-zombie creatures. Now, I'm not sure if Liliana is going to be making waves in Constructed at all, but when it comes to Limited, she is an amazing card to have hit the board in a game. So I was extremely happy to see her in my pool. And once again, it's one of the reasons why I went into black-green, was because of the Initiate and because of Liliana. Now let's get into the rest of the cards in this deck, and I'm going to be doing this in order of converted mana cost, starting with 2 cards that I probably wouldn't put into this deck if I were to build it all over again. First, we have Sixth Sense, which allows me to enchant a creature, and whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, I may draw a card. I did get to use this card, and it did allow me to draw a few cards in some of the games that I played. However, overall, I don't think there was a single time where I drew it that I wouldn't have preferred almost any other card in my deck. So, in the future, I probably won't be playing this card very heavily. Next, I have Shed Weakness, which is another card which I think on the surface seemed good, but it wasn't really useful in this deck. I didn't have a ton of stuff that I was going to be putting -1/-1 counters on, and things like the Initiate that I wanted to have -1/-1 counters on, I wouldn't necessarily want to use this on it. Even though it's a main, you don't have to remove the -1/-1 counters. I think for a 2/2 pump instant for 1 green, that's not bad, but overall it wasn't super useful in this deck. Now let's talk about some cards I would definitely put into a deck again if I was ever playing Sealed or Draft. Next up, I have Festering Mummy. For 1 black, you can get a 1/1 zombie, and when it dies, you may put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. This card is deceptively useful. I did not think it would be super great. I simply wanted a 1-drop creature in my deck, and this ended up being very, very useful in quite a few situations, especially if you want to block a 2/2 creature and then destroy it at the end of the turn, because you're doing 1 damage and you could put the -1/-1 counter on that creature and then kill it off. So overall, Festering Mummy, very useful. Next up, I have 2 copies of Supernatural Stamina. For 1 black, until the end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And this card was very useful. Saved so many of my creatures. Having 2 copies in the deck was really, really great. By the way, one of the copies I had was a foil too. Not that that's super special, but I thought I'd mention it because you can't really see it because I'm using graphics instead of the actual cards. As I mentioned previously, we have the Chandler Initiate. Next is another card which I can see being good in certain decks. I don't think it was super useful in this deck. I did include it because of one other card, which I'll talk about later, but we have Miasmic Mummy. For 1 and 1 black, you get a 2/2 Zombie Jackal. When it enters the battlefield, each player discards a card. So it's nice because your opponent discards a card. You also have to discard one as well too. There are certain cards which are useful if you do discard, so if you're playing some of those cards, I can see playing this in your deck. Otherwise, I would probably skip it. One card I probably won't skip in future decks is Doom Dissenter. For 1 and a black, you get a 1/1 human creature. When Doom Dissenter dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Great card, especially if you use something like Supernatural Stamina on it. It can be extremely useful in your deck. Then we have one of my favorite trials of the new Amonkhet set, Trial of Ambition. For 1 and 1 black, gets you an enchantment. When Trial of Ambition enters the battlefield, target opponent sacrifices a creature. When a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return Trial of Ambition to its owner's hand. This card was especially useful because of the next 2 cards that I have in my deck, which are the Cartouche of Strength and the Cartouche of Ambition. Now, the Cartouche of Strength is for 2 and 1 green. Enchant creature you control. When it enters the battlefield, you may have enchanted creature fight target creature and opponent controls. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. The Cartouche of Ambition is enchanted a creature you control for 2 and 1 black. When it enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and lifelink. With these 2 cartouches added with the trial, there were several times where I was able to play the trial, make them sacrifice, follow it up almost immediately with a cartouche, and then play the trial at the beginning of the next turn. It was very, very useful little combination, and I will definitely try to have decks that use that sort of mechanic again, especially when it comes to the Trial of Ambition. Next up, we have Nest of Scarabs, a card which obviously gets better and better the more creatures or other cards you have that will create -1/-1 counters on either your creatures or your opponent's creatures. The effect for this is whenever you put 1 or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, create that many 1/1 black insect creature tokens. So if this is out and then Chandler Initiate comes out, you're going to get 3 1/1 insect creature tokens. It's same thing goes for the Cartouche of Ambition. You'll get 1 insect creature token if Festering Mummy dies, and so on and so on and so on. So the more creatures or effects you have that create -1/-1 counters, this can be really, really useful. Not the greatest card to run into late in the game, but if you can get this out early enough, it can actually be a great little token creating engine for you. Then we have Painful Lessons, which is simply target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. I wasn't playing blue. I missed my card draw, so I added this to add a bit of card draw, and it actually came in useful in probably half the games I played in the pre-release. Next up, we have a bunch of 3-cost creatures in the form of Hooded Brawler, which you can exert, and it gets +2/+2 until the end of turn, and it's already a 3/2, so it gives it a nice body once you exert it. Next, we have Blighted Bat, which is a 2/1 zombie bat with flying. It also has, if you pay 1, it gains haste, so it is possible to attack with it if you have the extra mana available. It's great, as you probably know, if you're playing against an opponent that doesn't have many flying creatures. You put something like the Cartouche of Ambition on this, it becomes even better. Next, I have Wasteland Scorpion. It's a 2/2 Scorpion with Death Touch, but it also has cycling too. So if it's not useful, you can cycle it away and draw another card. I really, really like the cycling mechanic. I've always enjoyed it. I'm so glad it's back. 2 copies of Ornery Cadou. When it enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature you control. It's especially good if you have something like Festering Mummy on your board, or if you have the Doomed Dissenter on the board as well too. This plays great with it because you don't have to put the -1/-1 counter on this 3/4 body when it comes into play. Instead, you can put it on one of these other creatures, which will have a useful effect when they die. Now, getting into the 4-drops, we have our only 2 4-drops, and it's 2 copies of the same card, Quarry Hauler. It's a 4/3 camel. When it enters the battlefield, for each kind of counter on target permanent, put another counter of that kind on it or remove one from it. Now, this works for -1/-1 counters, but it also works with Liliana to either add, and I don't know why you'd ever want to remove a loyalty counter from her, but it will add a loyalty counter to Liliana if she is on the field. And that did happen in at least one game that I played in the pre-release. So overall, I really like Quarry Hauler. I've drafted it since playing the pre-release, and I think it's useful because it can also affect your opponent's creatures. So if your opponent has a creature with a -1/-1 counter, you can add one to it. Or if it has a beneficial counter on it, like one of their planeswalkers or an artifact with brick counters, you can remove it. Now we're going into the 5-drops in our deck. We've got Horror of the Broken Lands, which is a 4/4 horror creature. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, Horror of the Broken Lands gets +2/+1 until the end of turn. It also has cycling for 1 black. Now, its bonus from cycling wasn't a huge factor in this deck because I didn't have a ton with cycling. I don't think I ever actually got that effect to go off at a time where it was useful or I could attack or block with it. However, I was really low on big-butted creatures, so having a 4/4 for 5 was a compromise I was willing to make, especially since it did have cycling, so if I needed to, I could always get rid of it and draw another card. Next up, we have our last creature in this deck. It is Decimator Beetle. For 3, a black and a green, it gets you a 4/5 insect creature. When Decimator Beetle enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever Decimator Beetle attacks, remove a -1/-1 counter from target creature you control, and put a -1/-1 counter on top of one target creature defending player controls. I was always thrilled when this card would hit the board. I didn't have many big creatures in this deck, as you could see, so the Decimator Beetle was really like the champion as far as creatures go in this deck, and its ability was actually very, very useful because a lot of the time I had more than just one creature with a -1/-1 counter on it. So I was constantly able to attack and just put these -1/-1 counters on my opponent's creatures. And last but certainly not least, as I said at the beginning of the video, we had Liliana's Death Majesty, which, as you can imagine, was a huge bomb to throw down with this deck. Oh yes, and of course we had our land base, which consisted of 9 swamps and 8 forests. So there you go, folks. That was my deck for the Amonkhet pre-release and games 1 and 3 of the most recent Mana Caves. Now, I'm not going to tell you how I did on the Mana Cave because I don't want to spoil those videos if you haven't seen it. However, I did do a very mediocre 2-2 in the pre-release. So wasn't the greatest, but also wasn't the worst I've ever done. However, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave that in the comments section below. You can also contact or follow us on Twitter. It is @BrainPulpTV, or you can contact and follow me directly on Twitter @GeekTragedy. And now that all that is said, take care, everyone. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing. It means a lot to us here. May all your pulls be mythics, and I'll see you all very soon.